So you're here, and
I'm
glad
here.
to have you.
Thank you.
Let's start with the state budget. It cleared the House last Thursday night, early, 9 p.m.,
Very
which
cool.
is very unusual, past straight party lines, which is also unusual in the last couple of years. No rogue Democrats voting with the Republicans, and it's very unlikely to see any significant changes in the Senate. These things are usually pre-negotiated. So what does it mean for Rhode Island? What's this Rhode Island state budget, absent some catastrophe or political upheaval unanticipated? What's this budget mean for Rhode Island?
Well, I wish I could say it was business as usual, but it actually went back a few years. You know, the budget is built on a lot of gimmicks.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of one-time funding. And if you look through the list of one-time funding, the transfers of almost $30 million, which are scooping places like the Infrastructure Bank, NBC, Quonset Point. You know, if anybody had any money,
Is it legal to scoop those
yeah,
funds?
it's been done for a long time, sure.
On the quasi-publics, though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Then there's a tax amnesty, one-time tax amnesty for another $12 million. The increased vehicle and license fees we were paying, which was supposed to go into the highway safety and maintenance account, are being delayed, and that's another $9 to $10 million. So when you finish going through this thing, the budget was effectively balanced by using one-time revenues, and it was also, the crime was complicated by the fact that they've identified $25 million in savings, but they're across the board, so we don't know where they're going to
Right.
come from. The result is pretty simple. This year's, the budget that'll start July 1st, 2017 for fiscal 18, has a structural operating deficit of about $45 million in it. And when you look in the out years, there were out year deficits that were forecast by the governor when she submitted her budget. In the out years, they were about 190 million. Now they jumped to about 225 million at least. And so what we've done is, in order to fund this budget, to start a few new programs, we've used one-time funding, we've used some gimmicks, and in effect, we've put off the problem till the future.
Well, isn't it a huge, let's just go pure politics, but let's go big P politics. Isn't it a huge political mistake to push the fiscal problems into the budget right before an election? I mean, isn't that this is not, you know, President Obama just got into office and he's going to help the states out. This is President Trump and a House and Senate that are more likely to diminish resources potentially to the states. So you couple that on top of a structural deficit, on top of one-timers, you could have potentially a very significant problem next fiscal year.
Well, you're betting the economy will get better. But you're going to have a problem, and it's the problem we've had for a number of years. You're working against closing the deficit, so you really can't cut taxes how you'd like to cut taxes. You can't invest in programs you want. You're trying to muddle your way through. It's a very incremental muddling process. And that will work fine if there are no surprises. There'll be some tough decisions made, but not much different than what's been made in the past. But two things can happen. The first can happen is the unpredictability of what will come out of Washington.
Yeah.
And if there's any likelihood that Medicaid is cut, you won't see it so much in the 19 budget, but you'll begin to see it in the 20 budget. And with the political mindset here, I'm not sure how we adjust to that, where the money comes from. And then the second issue is you're betting on the economy just staying pretty much where it is. The national economy, you know, should, but if there's any kind of a hiccup, then you have a problem. You left less and less room for error is what you've done.
And you pushed off a significant, I mean, if you've done one-times and one-times and one-times, it's hard to do one-times. You know, your tax amnesty isn't going to get you 12 million, it's going to get you 2 million.
Yeah, but
in year two.
I've been around a lot of budgets, and I say the same thing. Boy,
Yeah.
it's too much one time, and somehow we muddled through. And you know, one year we found the tobacco settlement,
Right.
You know, and next year there was something else. So you can't see what's going to happen. But in terms of sound fiscal management, we've adopted a budget. We're using about 45 or $46 million in opening surplus. So our current revenues don't equal our current expenditures, and we might be able to muddle our way through again. Chances are that we could, but you never get out of your way. You're always managing a problem, and every state has financial problems. But until we get control and get our deficits under better management, there's just a reflection of our ability to be a kind of Midland place.
So, automobile owners are probably the big winner. They get some relief, and it increases over a period of time. Any other winners?
Oh yeah, there were several winners in the budget, and there were several things that you would support. The automobiles. We fully funded again for the 7th year in a row our education aid. These are small items, but people like free bus rides will have free bus rides.
Yeah, right.
Free bus rides again.
But that got restored. There's
Yeah.
no new winners.
No, and the governor's argument that we now have free tuition at CCRI. It's a pilot project.
Yeah.
2
2 years.
2 years. Let's see what happens with that. What about CCRI's capacity? It's interesting. Half the money will be used to build capacity, and half will be for the free tuition. How's that going to affect Rick? Will people that would otherwise enroll as freshmen go to CCRI? There are a lot of unanswered questions. So let's see how they manage that. But that's certainly not a game-changing proposal. And as a matter of fact, we're using resources that we know we needed to fix up school buildings, to invest in some of our urban schools. And in addition, there are things that outside the budget that affect the budget. So if the Evergreen contract, which would basically say that teacher contracts stay in force even though the contract expires, that goes forward, that would cost money. And if pensions, disability pensions for firefighters and public safety people are enhanced by letting them get disability if they have certain illnesses, frankly, off the job, that would cost local governments another $20 million. So you have to look at issues outside the budget. There were car tax was the one big cut, but it's hard to think of any other major programs. I think on a positive side, we're starting to wake up to what Commerce Rhode Island is all about. And I think the leadership of the legislature in cutting back the governor's request for Commerce RI for preferential tax deals by almost $20 million is a good wake-up call. But it'll only be a one-time call unless they organize during the interim and really do an audit and get behind what is actually happening with Commerce Rhode Island.
It's probably calling about your safety deposit box overflowing with.
Overflowing cash. Yeah.
Biggest losers out of the budget.
Well, the people of Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Because they basically got a budget that's balanced by using gimmicks. I thought the cuts that the governor had made in hospitals and nursing homes, the legislature made them whole, but there was no reform in the budget. There's not anything that you can point to say, oh, we're going to do this better.
Right.
Or we're going to make an investment here that's going to make a difference. It pretty much was a status quo with a car tax tacked on like the star on top of the Christmas tree.
Let's shift down to Washington, D.C.
Sure.
We've got I don't know if the CBO numbers came out.
They came out this afternoon.
Okay, I've been on, so I haven't heard the CBO numbers.
Nothing surprising.
Better or worse than the House?
Well, in one area better, in one area about the same.
Okay.
In terms of people that they say will lose coverage, it's marginally better. They say 22 million, I think the House posted 23 million. In terms of reducing the deficit, the House plan only reduced the deficit during the decade by about 133 billion. This is 321 billion, so it has a much bigger impact on the deficit.
Is this thing dead?
I don't know.
I mean, Susan Collins. Look at Susan Collins. Here's a moderate Republican from Maine, in the southern part of the state, which is the majority of the population, she's a Republican. It's a progressive part of the state, the Portland area. So they're not going to favor it. Those are Obama voters. In the northern part of the state, they voted for Trump. But those are Medicaid and Medicare folks. They're not going to be pleased. And how does she pull a lever for this type of? And she's not even on the list of 5 that have already stated that they're opposed to it.
Yeah, no, there are more than 5 that are opposed to it.
Yeah.
Probably 8 or so that are opposed to it. You know, at this time, it's hard to see how McConnell will bring the group together, but he has a tactical decision to make.
Yeah.
And this tactical decision is pretty direct. He can either appease the conservatives or he can appease the moderates. There are more conservatives that are against it right now.
Yeah.
So if he can pick up 5 of the conservative votes, he's got a chance of having it 50-50. I think you'll see some, further modifications to the bill. For example, with the CBO estimates, CBO does a good job. I'm not one of the people that sit and criticize them. I don't think they're partisan, but how they project loss of benefits, health insurance, is they assume that the states that if Obamacare has not changed, the states that haven't expanded Medicaid coverage will. Well, I don't know what that's based on. And then they base it that people will lose, Medicaid. Well, the disabled won't lose Medicaid, and in Rhode Island, the disabled account to the biggest area, about 3% of our spending. The seniors in nursing homes won't lose it, and children won't lose it. So the people that took advantage of the Medicaid program before the expansion are pretty safe. It's what happens to the people that were expanded to. And when you ask that question, what happens, this is where the fight comes in. I would argue as a conservative that there are provisions in both the House and the Senate bill, by no means perfect, a very imperfect compromise, that'll create incentives for these people to go into the private market. And so that's debatable. But everything is lined up against this thing succeeding. People don't want to give up entitlement. Entitlement's been around for 3 or 4 years. The CBO scores, the point that you make, it's facing opposition from all corners of the Republican Party. The reconciliation process makes it difficult to put together a comprehensive program because you have to stay within the Senate rules. And you're dealing with a chief executive that's very unpredictable. Today it's Maine, tomorrow it's not Maine. One day it's green, one day it's blue. So that's a tough talking point. The only reason I held out any hope that it might pass is that for the last 7 years, the Republican Party has been talking about repealing, and now that they're in power, they're going to look foolish if they don't repeal. The question's going to be raised: do they really want to repeal it in the first place? Or do they know how to repeal it? And so there's a political motivation to do something. I think John Cornyn said something out at the Koch brothers meeting in Denver this weekend, which he quickly retracted when the press found out about it. He said, well, July 4th, there's no magic in July 4th.
Yeah.
The magic is August 1st. You can't go on. And the problem that the leadership has is do you make it more difficult to get votes the longer you wait, the more this thing is out there? And that's
that's the discussion, which is once these folks go home for the recess, this thing's dead, because once they face the community meetings and the visits to their offices and the sit-ins, that it won't be 5 to 8 that have some concerns about this. It may be a lot more. It's certainly, high drama. Everything Trump does is high drama. There's also some discussion tomorrow that William Kennedy will tip his hat if he's going to continue on the U.S. Supreme Court. Obviously, you saw a major decision by a more conservative court issued today on the travel ban. Trump's legacy could be creating the most conservative court in the history of the United States if 2 justices in his first 6 months on the job.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know what Justice Kennedy only Justice Kennedy knows what Justice Kennedy will do. But it's interesting. that he didn't make the announcement today, the final, day of
Yep.
the term. But I think Sandra Day O'Connor made her announcement 2 days after the
Yep,
end
right.
of the term. I don't know what the rumors are, but he's 80 years old. He's a strong supporter of the institution, and I am of the opinion that he's a strong supporter of the institution. And with all the tumult that we have right now in the executive and in the Congress, that each time you bring a new associate justice onto the court, there's a get used to process.
Yeah.
And so I think if he has the stamina, and he may stay on until things stabilize, because he's such a strong defender of the institution.
Did you have an event recently?
An event?
A party, hosted something?
Oh, I was one of the co-hosts of an event for Bob Flanders.
And how was that?
It was very nice.
And would you serve? Were there Cheetos? I mean, did you
Oh,
go?
it was better than
Was there
Cheetos.
Chex Mix? What?
I wish there was Chex Mix like that. There were hors d'oeuvres. It was very.
We'll try and get Chex Mix here next time you're on here.
It was very low key, very casual. There were hors d'oeuvres, very nice.
Nice. And any sense of the party? Any surprise guests? Was Mitch McConnell there? Any?
No, he has this thing in Washington. He has a health problem, I understand, so he couldn't come.
Could not come.
Yeah.
And did former Justice Flanders enjoy his? Was it at your home?
Oh, no.
Oh.
It was at a restaurant in East Greenwich.
Restaurant.
It was mainly for East Greenwich people. It wasn't necessarily statewide.
Gotcha. Successful?
I think so.
Good. News out today that Joe Trillo is having an event for
Tomorrow
for running for potentially running for governor. And Joe Trillo and Alan Fung, does that create some problems for the Republicans? Is that a healthy debate, or is that a?
Well, I don't think, I've never been a big opponent of primaries. I think you have to, win in a primary, but you want to make peace when the primary is over.
Yeah.
Joe Trillo's interesting guy. He was an early backer of Trump.
Yep.
He was very much identified with the Trump campaign in Rhode Island. There are a lot of Trump headwinds right now.
Yep.
So his candidacy is going to be impacted by what the perception of Trump is, and so we'll see. But he's certainly going to explore, I assume.
Certainly last week was Democrats eating Democrats around here. I think we had every day between the progressives and the traditional party leaders a different statement about why the other one was wrong, fired over to go local, and we called it, I think, a donkey brawl on Saturday, and it was fierce language. I have to say, for it not being an election cycle, it was probably the most aggressive language by both parties. That very unusual to see that within the party, 16 months or 14 months or whatever the date is before
But I'll tell you, the challenge that Republicans have, isn't a primary in Rhode Island. The front is 52 senators, we have a majority in the House, Republican president, 33 governors,
Yep.
1,000 more state legislators than since Obama, came into office, and the Democrats can't be our excuse.
Yeah,
We have,
right.
And I think people will be judged by what's accomplished. So whether it's Joe Trillo or Alan Fung or Bob Flanders whoever runs for office, we have to focus. And you asked the question before about whether people will run for the woods if too much gets out on Obamacare. There are some tough choices. There are tough choices, no question about that. I think the best strategy is to stick to your knitting. You try to work on the policy that you talked about. Do the best you can to implement your campaign promises, and these are not peerages. And so if people don't like it, they turn you out fine.
Right.
But you're not going to win by hiding. You can run, but you can't hide. And the only way to counter this and to counter whatever headwinds are coming from Trump and his administration is to get your job done and worry about the popularity of it once you get something done. And I think it's going to be an interesting discussion within the Republican caucus in the Senate, because there are a lot of Republicans that understand that for 7 years we campaigned on repealing Obamacare.
Yeah, that's right.
And we may not have the perfect solution, but if we show that we're inept and can't do what we said we were going to do, no matter how imperfect, that's a recipe that no one wants to eat in the morning. And so I think you stick to policy. And I've always felt that Ronald Reagan, if I don't quote Ronald Reagan once a day, I know I hadn't had a good day. Good policy is good politics, and good politics is good policy. And so it's stick to your policy.
As always, appreciate it.
My pleasure.
We are off next week.
Great.
July 3rd, we will be running Best Of, both on July 3rd and July 4th. I really appreciate all the insights. It's it really is, especially, I think at both places, a really interesting period of time to be looking at these issues. Obviously, almost every day out of Washington is groundbreaking. The pace is tremendous, of really earth-shattering. I think everybody was overjoyed that Saturday and Sunday, from a national news standpoint, nothing huge broke, but we were right back at it.
And the court came out with some interesting decisions.
Absolutely. So we'll be back at it in 2 weeks.